Hey everybody, welcome back to BobkeTV. Time for a preview of Milano-San Remo La Classicissima, the first monument of the season. Let's remind ourselves quickly what the monuments are. There's 5 of them. They are not to be confused with classics or semi-classics. Those categories you can debate amongst yourselves for as long as you'd like to. I don't really care that much. Milano-San Remo, the 5 monuments: Flanders, Roubaix, Liège-Bastogne-Liège, Milano-San Remo, and Tour of Lombardia. So the Italians get 2 of them. I guess the Belgians do also. But anyways, Milano-San Remo, 300 kilometers, 180 miles of about 130 miles of relative calm, even though can be fast, the weather can be bad, can be crosswinds once in a while, can be wickedly quick, and those are generally clipped off at a pretty reasonable tempo. But the last 40 to 50 miles are so dangerous. It's a crash fest. That's usually one of the defining characteristics. Unfortunately, guys are so tired in the finale, they don't want to slow down. Their reaction time is much slower. They have a tendency to plow into each other and pile it up, myself included. Caught behind many a crash in Milano-San Remo. The roads generally are pretty wide, but there's a couple of places where they get narrow and guys are absolutely drilling it at the front, trying to get to the front, trying to stay at the front, and the fight for position is really incredible. And when you multiply that by the fatigue and the stakes and the unwillingness of riders to break, you see a lot of guys plowing into each other and going down. Then you have the domino effect, and of course that's one of the defining characteristics of Milano-San Remo. Also, twisty, dangerous, high-speed descents cause crashes. Even into the last kilometer, guys are bouncing off of each other and falling down, which we saw last year. So that's one of the defining characteristics. Profile-wise, it's not the hardest hills, not the steepest hills, but they come quickly at the end. 3 tough ones just before the finish. The Poggio and the Cipressa, the last 2. The Cipressa, a much more difficult climb. The Poggio generally clipped off in the big chain ring for the very best guys at the front. And so it's a high-speed climb where the pure sprinters, if their teams support them and have the strength, can stay at least close enough to the front to have a chance in the sprint. There is an aerodynamic advantage because the climbs are so fast. They're clipped off at such an incredible rate that sitting in the pack does give some shelter to the riders. The Poggio itself, the last climb, comes very close to the finish line, and it's a kind of steep at the beginning with some twists and turns, but there's a pretty long false flat across the top for the last kilometer and a half, whereby the sprinters, the fastest guys, can stay sheltered by their teammates and stay near the front of the race, and then a very technical, high-speed, dangerous descent where if very strong riders like Fabian Cancellara, who's done so in the past, have a little advantage. It's so close to the finish line from the bottom of the last descent, they sometimes have a chance to stay away. It doesn't happen very often, but once in a while, once in a blue moon, it does. It's 300 Ks of absolute glorious bike racing. It's the first monument of the year, so there's always a lot of speculation about who's going well. And the course is so consistent that it's nice to compare eras. It's nice to compare great champions. It's really fun to compare the attributes of the riders now, what's required to win, and compare that to the 100+ years of history in what is, scenery-wise, the most beautiful of all classics. Sometimes a breakaway succeeds if the riders have made a very tough race from about the halfway point. Once we get to the coast, and in the day when there was 9 or 10 riders per team, you could do that. Now that there's only 8 riders per team, you have 7 teammates for the sprinters. The chances of that are a lot less. So that's why we see bunch gallops, or at least a reduced peloton, contesting the finish line in recent years. John Degenkolb won 2 years ago. Arnaud Démare won last year. Degenkolb, a very fast sprinter. Démare, obviously one of the field sprinters that is competitive for all the sprint stages in the races he competes at, against the likes of Greipel, Kittel, Cavendish, etc. Many great sprinters nowadays. Greipel and Kittel, a little bit too pure of a sprinter. I think Marcel Kittel and Andre Greipel could most certainly be competitive in this, but they would have to base their whole season on it, and that might be to the detriment of the rest of their season. Plus, both of those teams have riders also capable of winning Milan-San Remo. Lotto Soudal has Tony Galopin, that not a favorite this year. And of course, Quick-Step has maybe the #1 favorite, along with Peter Sagan, Fernando Gaviria. I'll get to Gaviria in a second. Let's start with Peter Sagan for favorites. The hot favorites, the hottest favorite, because of the way the course lays out and his qualifications as a bike racer. He's strong enough to go with the moves over the Poggio, the last climb, and he's fast enough to win in the sprint. So if a group does not get away, he stays in the group, he can still win. If a group does get away, he can go with them and most certainly cooperate to the line. That's probably the best case scenario for Peter Sagan. The rest of the field will not want that to happen. So it's very tough for Sagan to execute something like that. He would have to make a combine with riders that were willing to risk going in a breakaway with Sagan in order to improve their chances at winning. And there's very few guys that are willing to do that. And so what makes Peter Sagan so dangerous is if that scenario doesn't play out, he can still wait in the field and from a reduced group have a great chance to win. So Peter Sagan is the preemptive favorite. He can win from any scenario, and that's why in Milano-San Remo, he probably won't win. When the whole field is looking at you and waiting for you, if you blow your nose, they blow your nose, the whole field, and that's, for 180 miles, a little aggravating, and it generally doesn't work out for the hot favorite. In a race like Milano-San Remo, in a race like the Giro d'Italia, Tour de France, it's a totally different story. In 3 weeks' time, the very best rise to the top. But Milano-San Remo, the differences are not as obvious in a one-day race. That's not that difficult, terrain-wise. So the riders will have to be going flat out for 100 Ks before the finish line. And the harder they go, the faster they go, the better the chances that Peter Sagan has to win. If it's a normal Milano-San Remo, Fernando Gaviria is going to win. I'll tell you what, he has the best team in the bike race. Quick-Step with Tom Bonin, Sabatini, Philippe Gilbert, Julien Vermote are by far the strongest team. And I think they can control the tempo in the last couple of climbs with the riders that they have. Especially Tom Bonin, and he's said he's totally dedicated to Gaviria, so it's going to be tough for Fernando to be beaten. He's got a lot of incentive to do so because of last year within sight of the finish line. Just one momentary lapse of concentration, touch wheels, went down, didn't have a chance to win. There's a whole lot of other guys that also have the potential to win. John Degenkolb, aforementioned, he's got something to prove too. Did not race last year after winning the previous year because of that big crash in Spain in training camp that wiped out 8 of the giant Alpecin riders, which is now the Sunweb squad, which brings me to another rider with a chance, Michael Matthews. He started his season in Europe, his race season at Paris-Nice. Did not go as well as it had last year, and I have a feeling that he's a little bit behind schedule training-wise, and he will be competitive later on in the year, but not this weekend at Milan-San Remo. Ben Swift, Outsider, UAE, very quick. If things go perfectly, a chance for the podium for Ben Swift. Christophe, Arnaud Demar, who I mentioned before, Greg van Avermaet. Not quite strong enough to break away on the Poggio, and not quite quick enough to win the sprint, but most certainly capable of being on the podium. Sonny Colbrelli, getting a chance to race on a World Tour team and has been successful already with a big stage win against the best sprinters in Paris-Nice. But I'm going to give you the dark horse winner of Milano-San Remo for 2017. Somebody that nobody's really, or maybe they've forgotten about or not considering, but hasn't been hyped up a lot at all in the press, and the pressure is off. Mark Cavendish. Why not Cav? Why not Cav win this again? He's won it before. That was impressive ride. Cavendish, and this is what the best do, is they are motivated by the biggest races and they rise to the occasion. And Mark Cavendish been pretty quiet recently, but leg speed, forget about it. Everybody knows about that. And he's at the point in his career where he has enough strength and resistance and tactics to know exactly what to do the entire day of racing. And that's going to be the difference. So I'm going to give you the podium. Gaviria first, Cavendish second, Sagan third. Let me know how I do on Sunday after the race. Race is tomorrow. I hope everybody gets a chance to see it some way, somehow. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Comments below. Let me know how it goes. Who do you think's going to win? And subscribe. Click on my face, t-shirts, etc., merchandise. Click on the icon with the t-shirt. Thumbs up, greatly appreciated. All right, everybody, thanks a lot. And go Cav.